Welcome to our fifth lesson out of sixth. So we're nearing the end, but we're still on this wonderful journey. Captivating cases of rabbinic responsa. And in this lesson, we find out a very important value in a posek. A posek is a halachic decisor, a rabbi who's qualified to give a psak, make a halachic ruling. Not every rabbi is qualified. In fact, I'm such a rabbi. I am not qualified to give these kind of halachic rulings. These very high level, advanced. You have to train. You have to do apprenticeship. There's all this criteria. And sometimes you can have a rabbi who is qualified, but only in one area of Jewish law. Like he's qualified in doing marriages, or he's qualified in medical ethics. Just because someone's qualified in one area doesn't automatically mean they're qualified in all areas. You need a tremendous amount of expertise. But in this lesson, we'll learn about another important element that a rabbi needs in order to answer questions properly. So, broadly speaking, the Code of Jewish Law is divided, or the Code of Jewish Conduct. Last week we spoke about a book that was published that blended the Ashkenaz and Sephardic traditions on Jewish conduct into one volume. That was the Code of Jewish Law. It's divided into four sections. Section number one is called Orach Chaim, the path of life. In that volume, you can find the laws of Shabbat, the laws of prayer, the laws of holidays, tzitzit, tefillin, very classical mitzvahs that a Jew is doing on a regular basis. And the second section is called Yoredeya, which is like teaching knowledge. It deals with other very common laws that a person has to know in their kitchen, like kosher or idol worship or other things that a Jew has to know. And then the third volume is called Even HaEzer, the Stone of Help, which deals with marital laws and family law and different things like that. And finally, the last book, Choshen Mishpat, is like the volume for rabbis, how to be a rabbi. All right, and similar laws of, laws connected to civil law and damages and tort law and all these interesting cases. But there is a phrase that people say that there's a fifth Shulchan Aruch, the fifth volume in Shulchan Aruch. Joel, you've ever heard that phrase? The fifth volume in Shulchan Aruch? No? Yeah.
It escapes my mind.
Okay. So today we're going to learn about that fifth volume of Shulchan Aruch. You won't find it on a bookshelf, on a Jewish bookshelf. You find it somewhere else. So to begin, let us start with the introduction, which is, it's actually not a text. Okay, it goes as follows. Everyone knows one of the most famous stories of King Solomon. King Solomon, his father passes away. He is the new king. He's very young. And he's very anxious and nervous. Will he be able to fulfill this position? That night he has a dream. And in the dream, God says, "What do you want? Do you want wealth? Do you want strength? What do you want?" And he says, "I want wisdom. I want wisdom. That's what I want. The wisdom to lead this people properly." And God says, "You'll have the wisdom and you'll also have the strength and the wealth, that comes along once you have wisdom." So he chose wisely. He was already wise when he chose wisdom. And the next morning, a case is presented before him. Two women come to him with a baby. Each one says, "The baby's mine. We both had the baby together." The first one says, "Her baby died and my baby is the living one." And the second woman says, "No, my baby's alive. Her baby is the dead one." King Solomon says, he pulls out his sword. He repeats the case. He's like, "So you're saying that her baby died and your baby's alive. And you're saying that your baby's alive and her baby died. Okay, we'll take a sword and we'll divide the baby in half." And one woman says, "I accept your judgment." And the other woman says, No. I'd rather the other woman keep the baby. King Solomon says, you're the real woman, and she receives the child. And everyone in the kingdom is so amazed at Solomon's wisdom, and they make a great celebration, and that's how that's how the story of King Solomon begins. There's a parallel joke on this story. In the shtetl, there were two future mother-in-laws looking for a suitable young man, a good yeshiva bacher, who's going to marry their daughter. So they send in a letter to the yeshiva. Please send us two suitable, one for my daughter and one for the other daughter. Okay. So the yeshiva chooses two yeshiva bachers. They get on the train, and halfway through, one of the yeshiva bachers gets cold feet and leaves. So when the bacher arrives, they bring him to the rabbi. Each mother-in-law is saying, "He's for my daughter, my daughter." So the rabbi says, "We got to cut the bacher in half." So one lady says, "No, no, no, I let the other family have her." The other one says, "No, no, no, cut him in half." It's like, you're the real mother-in-law. We'll give him to the one that wants him cut in half is the real mother. Okay. So now, if you were a rabbi today and you were presented with, this kind of situation, the baby, two women are claiming the baby is mine, the baby is mine. If you open the code of Jewish law, what are you going to find? Possession is 9/10 of the law. That means whoever's holding the baby, that's who gets to keep the baby. The burden of proof is on the other party. If you have no proof, nothing. And yet, King Solomon, when he used this, the fifth chelek of Shulchan Aruch, the fifth volume, which is called common sense. Sometimes you smell that there's something deeper here than what you're seeing. You're presented with just the facts, you might rule one way. But if you're able to sniff out a little deeper, sometimes you're able to arrive at the just solution, even if you have to figure it out. So in King Solomon's case, he saw one woman was focused. What did she say first? The other baby is dead. Because she said that first, that means clearly it was a jealousy thing. It was hard for her to live with the fact that her baby was dead. So she started off her claim, her baby is dead, mine is alive. The other woman said, my baby's alive first. And it means that's what's concerning her. So King Solomon was able to sense here there's something deeper going on, and he just had to figure out a stunt, to get the truth to come out. But so this is the idea of the fifth chelek, using this, understanding human behavior, understanding human psyche, being sensitive to what incentives motivate people is an important rule. Let's take a look at text 1. Sophie, read for us text 1. Page 191. Page 191.
Okay. I remember the off-script conversations we had with my teacher, the great Rabbi Moshe Sofer of blessed memory. He would tell us, "Take heed, my children, mastering the 4 sections of the Shulchan Aruch, Code of Jewish Law, is a great achievement, but it's within reach. The challenge lies in the 5th section of the Shulchan Aruch, knowing how to guide a generation and a community according to its unique needs, knowing when to act and when to hold back, when to be lenient and when to be strict. That requires extraordinary help from heaven."
Okay. So understanding people is a very element in deciding Jewish law. Understanding not only what is the question, but who's asking the question. Understanding who's asking the question makes all the difference. Let's go to, in my personal life, I remember asking a rabbi a very difficult question, and the rabbi gave me an answer that I thought would be the answer, but it made things very complicated for me. And then he didn't stop there. Then he said, but I have advice for you, a solution. And he gave me advice, a wonderful, just his deep understanding of people, a wonderful solution, a way of navigating through the situation, which made things much easier. So just that's another element. It's not just yes, no, am I allowed, permitted, prohibited. It's about understanding the people. A wonderful illustration of this is a famous case in the Soloveitchik family. There was once a man who comes to Rabbi Soloveitchik the night before the night before Passover. Says, Rabbi, can I use 4 cups of milk instead of my 4 cups of wine for the Seder? Anyone know the answer? Can you use milk instead of wine?
No.
So the rabbi says, it's too busy right now. It's just too busy right now for me to find the answer. Here's 250 coins. Just go buy wine. So when he leaves, the Rebbitzin comes out, 250 coins? Wine is much cheaper than that. You don't need, with maybe 40, he can buy the wine for the Seder. So the rabbi says, if he's asking if he could use milk, that means he's not even considering serving meat at his Seder. He doesn't even have money for meat. I realized, okay, he doesn't just need money for the wine, he needs money for the meat too. Right? This is what's called, the fifth chalik. And do you think he didn't know that milk is not allowed? He knew that milk is not allowed, but he wanted to be sensitive. He didn't want to make the person feel like he's getting a handout. Instead, he wanted to make the person feel like, you're doing me a favor by taking the money. I don't have time to figure out the answer, so just take the money and save me the headache of figuring out the answer. He didn't want to embarrass him, right? So you see how this is the rabbi's responsibility, not just yes, no, allowed, not allowed. It's really understanding human nature. And we will jump into our first case. There's a similar thing. Rabbi Manis Friedman shares the story. He was once in the house of a rabbi, Rabbi Abel Paltiel. I don't know if and a couple comes to him. It's Friday night, and the woman says, Rabbi, they're both from fat. They didn't grow up religious. They became religious. They became connected to Chabad. They're newly married. And she says, Rabbi, isn't it true that you're not allowed to stir the chicken soup Friday night while it's still on the stove blech? Isn't that true? And Rabbi Paltiel says, I have to think about it. I have to go check it up. I'm a little busy right now. So they go leave. And Rabbi Friedman says, what do you mean? It's clear. You're not allowed. You're not allowed while it's still on the oven top. You have to take it off. You can't leave it on because stirring helps with the cooking. He says, I knew that, but she wasn't asking a question. She felt that her husband didn't know things. She was trying to, and I knew this wouldn't be good for their marriage. Maybe she would win the war. She would win the battle, but she would lose the war. What is she? I'm going to say the husband's wrong. He's going to be embarrassed. She's going to lose her respect for him. Where's it going to go from there? So this is an important ingredient in parents. So sometimes a rabbi knows the sensitivities, but it doesn't mean you could change the law. Just because you know the sensitivities, you can't just bend the law because it's hard. The truth is hard. Sometimes the truth is hard. But a rabbi has to be sensitive how he shares it. But there are certain areas of Jewish law where understanding human nature actually changes the law. And we'll start off with such a case. We're going to start off with a responsa from Rabbi Yitzchak Weiss, a rabbi in England, on text 2a, page 194. Gilda, you have the honor to read for us text 2a, page 194.
Can you hear me? I'm not sure if my speaker is on.
We can hear you.
All right. Okay. on the bottom here, but by the grace of God, Friday, Erev Shabbat, Parshat Reah, Manchester, the Rabbi Yosef Tzvi Pearl Katz. A patient with a contagious disease is hospitalized in a facility where all items patients bring in are incinerated. Is it permitted to bring tefillin there to fulfill the mitzvah? I have already written in Shelat Uteshavat Milchat Yitzhak that I'm inclined to say one should not bring tefillin so as not to risk the severe desecration involved in their burning. See there. As to what you wrote, that it isn't certain that they will be burned, for perhaps researchers will discover a new cure, and the illness will no longer be contagious, and the incineration protocol will be lifted. Certainly, this is an unlikely possibility, even though in recent times, science has discovered many new treatments. It is well known that when it comes to caution around contagious diseases, the medical field is more stringent today than in previous generations. Consequently, the likelihood that the incineration protocol will be lifted is remote.
Right. So he kind of says a person's in the hospital in a contagious disease unit, and you go in, you don't walk out with anything that you came in with. Everything's burnt, incinerated. Can he bring in his tefillin? So Rabbi Weiss is saying, I already wrote about this matter. You asked me about a very specific case, but you should know I already wrote about this matter, and there's reasons both ways. Tefillin for a man to put on tefillin is a great mitzvah, and it's an obligation, and it's a daily mitzvah. On the other hand, burning tefillin is a grave desecration, and because of this, because both ways are, you can't say yes and you can't say no. In such a you have to we have a principle, shav al tase, better do nothing. That's kind of what you have to do. You just do nothing. You don't bring in the tefillin and you don't do the mitzvah. So you think that's the conclusion, but that's not Rabbi Yitzchak Weiss' conclusion in this specific individual's case. That was as a general rule. As a general rule, you're not he said we should do nothing. We shouldn't bring the tefillin into the hospital. But then in this specific case, let's look at text 2b. Gilda, continue. You're doing such a good job.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's on page 196. 196. Okay. However, I was prompted to reconsider by a distinguished Torah scholar who argued that withholding the tefillin could cause significant distress to a God-fearing patient, deeply pained by his inability to fulfill the mitzvah. Such emotional anguish might even compromise the patient's physical health. In light of this, there is room to be lenient and permit bringing tefillin to the hospital. The scholar showed me that the great and righteous LUBAVITCH Rebbe, may he be well, wrote to him this line of thinking regarding a patient for whom there was a question of whether he was permitted to pray and study Torah. Therefore, in our case, if the patient asks for tefillin, and we know that he will suffer greatly if he cannot fulfill the mitzvah, and there is concern that this distress may cause mental deterioration, we should rule leniently. After all, there is no definitive ruling in this case, and my prior ruling was only that, due to the doubt, it is preferable to remain passive. Therefore, under the above-mentioned circumstances, we should allow him to bring tefillin so he may fulfill the mitzvah and be at ease.
All right. Well, so what is happening over here? When it comes to a patient Their emotional well-being is a very important part of their well-being. In fact, a woman who goes to the hospital to give birth on Shabbat, so she needs to go to the hospital because she needs. What about her husband? Is her husband allowed to join her? Yes, because she'll feel distress that she has no support system with her. So for her emotional well-being, when it comes to health, is a very important consideration. Where do we see that? Let's jump ahead. Before we jump ahead, let's understand. He quoted a letter from the Lubavitch Rebbe. What was the Lubavitch Rebbe's case referring to? The Lubavitch Rebbe's case was a case of a patient with a catheter. Okay, a patient has a catheter. You're not allowed to pray and study Torah in a room with bodily waste. So a patient who has a catheter almost has like a bag of waste right next to his bed all the time. So a rabbi wanted a rule that this Jewish patient is not allowed to pray or study Torah. And he asked the Rebbe about his opinion. And what did the Rebbe say? Let's take a look at text 3. And text 3 is just one little point where the Rebbe makes 2 points, right? So first of all, he said not necessarily is waste that comes through a catheter, it's not the regular way. It's urine, like it doesn't come out in the regular way. So maybe there's room to be lenient there. The second point the Rebbe made was that putting on tefillin and praying is biblical, while not praying in a room with waste is a rabbinic decree. So maybe if you had other options, you shouldn't pray there. But here he has no other options. But then here's the third point. This is the Rebbe's main point. Let's take a look at text 3. Felice, maybe you can read for us text 3 on page 198. Oh, it's on mute. Not able to. We can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Preventing this patient from praying or studying the Torah will certainly lead to emotional distress and consequently may also weaken the patient's physical health. Several practices have been permitted when this concern is relevant.
Okay. And what does he say at the end? See, what's the parentheses?
Oh, see, Shalohan Aruch. Oh, I don't.
Choshen Mishpat. See Shulchan Aruch Choshen Mishpat 254. So let's take a look at what it says there. What does it say in Choshen Mishpat 254? It says the following. On Shabbat, you are not allowed to do a legal transaction. Okay? What's a legal transaction? If I want to give you ownership, is my words enough? If I tell you, Sophie, I want to give you my bedroom set, that doesn't make ownership. I could come back 2 weeks later and change my mind, and it was just words. Now, is it a nice thing to do? No, it's not nice to break your promise, but it's not binding. Now, imagine someone's on their deathbed and says, oh, you, I give this, you, I give that. He's giving everything. Well, afterwards, all the kids are going to show up with their lawyers, just because dad said this, dad said that. There's something that's important. It's called a kinyan. A kinyan is when the person who's receiving the gift gives a scarf or a hat to the person, and the person lifts it up. When the person lifts it up, see on the screen, the person's like holding a scarf or something. That shows that his word is meaningful. It's like a handshake. It's the biblical handshake. It's called a kinyan. You're showing something. It's not just words. You're really committed to it. So a kinyan is something very important. As a general rule, you're not allowed to do a kinyan on Shabbos. Shabbos is a day of rest by rabbinic decree. They say, we don't do a kinyan on Shabbos. You could do it on Friday, you could do it on Sunday, but not on Shabbos. What happens if someone feels they're about to die and it's Shabbos? So could you imagine they feel the stress that they have to wait till after Shabbos to do the Kinyan? So over there in Code of Jewish Law, Choshen Mishpat, page 254, it says this rabbinic decree is lifted because of the distress that it will cause the deathly ill person not to be able to bestow his last will and testament to his family members or to his friends. So we see that even in the Code of Jewish Law, it has the understanding that when people are ill, we make accommodations for them to remove distress because it's an important part of either their healing or even if it's not going to bring to healing, there's a very big mitzvah of easing the distress of a Jewish person. And so rabbinic decrees are lifted for that purpose. Right? So, there's a joke of a nurse who comes in and sees the husband is Morris Schwartz is saying he's surrounded by his wife and his 3 children, and he says, "Bernie, I want you to take the Beverly Hills mansions, and Susan, I want you to take the apartments in Los Angeles Plaza. Jaime, I want you to take the offices over in downtown, and Sarah, my dear wife, please take all the residential buildings." Then he slips out of consciousness, and the nurse turns to, is like, "Wow, your husband must have worked so hard to be able to develop all these, become a real estate mogul." The wife says, "Real estate mogul? He's giving us his paper routes." He's giving us his paper routes. Yeah, fine. But just from this law and this part of Code of Jewish Law is saying, here's a case built into Jewish law is sensitivity is built into the law that if we see a person is under distress and it's going to prevent their healing or it's their time of death, we lift rabbinic decrees to help them. Okay, not always is that the case. Sometimes it's not a case of health. And so we cannot bend the Torah, But even if we can't bend the Torah, we can still use our seichel. We can still use our common sense. So let's go on to the next case. Okay, the next case is a story that shows us the history of what our Jewish ancestors have gone. So we have to rewind the clock, go back in history to the time of Maimonides. Time of Maimonides, Yemen isn't like today. At that time, Yemen was crazy. I'm joking. Yemen is still crazy. But at that time, Jews lived in Yemen. There was a lot of Jews that lived in Yemen. And Yemen was in control of a very forceful Muslim government. And they were forcing the Jews under heavy pressure to abandon their faith as Jews and become Muslim. Okay? Some Jews did. Many Jews didn't and were killed. And other Jews, kind of similar to what we discovered in Spain 200 years afterwards in the Spanish Inquisition, we had these crypto Jews. So it wasn't just under the Christians, it was also under the Muslims. Okay? So we're reading about this case. And there's a famous letter where Maimonides is writing or is responding to a letter he receives from the rabbi of that community. The rabbi in Yemen is seeking guidance from Maimonides, who is in Cairo, Egypt. So let's take a look at this Responsa, text 4a. Genya, if you could read for us. You're on mute.
Okay. Faith under fire, Maimonides. You mentioned that the ruler of Yemen decreed a forced conversion on the Jews and compelled all the inhabitants of his domain to renounce their faith, as the Almohads did in Morocco and Spain. This news has shaken us to our core and left all our communities alarmed. You also mentioned the confusion the decree caused among some people, leading them to falter in their faith and lose their belief, while others' faith remained intact.
And continue, text 4b.
So not fit for the crown, Maimonides. You wrote about the man who boasted of being Mashiach in Yemen. I am neither surprised by him nor by those who follow him. I am not surprised about him, for he is Could you just hold on for a second? My family.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay, so I am neither surprised by him nor those who follow him. I am not surprised about him, for he is undoubtedly deranged, and there is no shame in an illness that's not self-inflicted. As for those who followed him, their behavior is due to their suffering and their ignorance about the lofty stature of Mashiach. What surprised me was your doubt about this matter, given that you are a learned person who has seen the words of the sages. I'm surprised that you wrote that this claimant is known for his piety and possesses a bit of wisdom. Do these qualities make someone God's Mashiach? Mashiach will be in stature highest among the prophets and the most distinguished after Moses. A prophet must be supremely wise to be granted prophecy by God, as our sages taught. Prophecy only rests upon who is wise, strong, and wealthy. From Talmud Shabbat 92a. They clarified that strong refers to conquering inner temptation, and wealthy refers to being rich in knowledge. Accordingly, we would not believe an ignorant person who claims to be a prophet, how much more so when he claims to be Mashiach. We know of this man's ignorance because you related how he commanded people to give all their wealth to charity, and they did not obey him. They acted correctly while he sinned. The Talmud in Ketubot 50a teaches that one who gives generously should not give away more than fifth of their assets. I thought it was 10.
No, 10 is the minimum. 10 is the minimum for a Jewish person. Should give a tenth, but at most 20%. You could give up to 20%. Okay, so
Oh,
what?
okay.
Yeah. So what's Maimonides? So this is just a small part of a very long letter that Maimonides is called Igeret Teman, the letter to Yemen, to the Jews in Yemen. And this is one part of this long letter. And what's he writing? They weren't just dealing with an issue of a Muslim dictator. They had another issue on their hand. There's this false Messiah, someone who's claiming to be Mashiach, and now many Jews are very desperate. They're like, we really need a Mashiach now. This guy's saying he's Mashiach. Okay, we don't have a lot of. We hope so. We hope he's Mashiach. Now, this rabbi is writing to Maimonides, what should I do? Maimonides is like, what do you mean, what should he do? This guy is obviously not Mashiach. He's deranged. He's mentally unwell. It's not his fault that he thinks he's Mashiach. He's deranged. But you're the rabbi there. This guy's clearly not Mashiach. But then Maimonides gives him special advice. He didn't just tell him the person's not Mashiach. Because why didn't the rabbi himself, the rabbi in Yemen, not figure this out on his own? Why didn't he need Maimonides here? He felt, my community is so desperate for Mashiach, they're not going to listen to me if I say that, if I tell them he's not Mashiach. I have to get Maimonides involved. Maimonides, everyone respects. So if Maimonides says the guy's not Mashiach, then it's a solution. But then Maimonides, here we see the sensitivity to understanding the situation. Let's take a look at text 4c. Kenya, continue text 4c, page 204.
Okay. Okay. Diffusing a threat, Maimonides. I will offer you sound advice for the benefit of both the messianic pretender and for your entire community. Imprison this man for a time until it becomes widely known among the non-Jews that he is mentally unstable. Make this public knowledge and then release him. By doing this, you will save him. When the non-Jews hear of his claims, they will mock him and consider him a madman. Is he truly as he truly is, but they will leave him alone. This maneuver will also protect your community from persecution. However, if you allow him to remain free until his actions become known to the non-Jews, they will likely execute him. He may also become a cause for persecution against the entire community.
They saying, do the guy a favor, do this false Mashiach a favor, arrest him. Jewish power is to arrest this guy. You're helping everyone. You're helping him because he won't be captured by the leaders, the Muslim leaders. They don't like they don't like false or real messiahs. Why? Because first of all the Jews they forced to convert to Islam will feel like, oh, maybe I should be brave enough and come out as an open Jew because Mashiach's here any moment, right? So Muslim leaders like Mashiach ideas. So he's saying it's going to end up causing that that this false Mashiach will be killed and your community will suffer. Do your community a favor, do this false Mashiach a favor, arrest him, and then a few days later release him. At least then it'll come into the news that the Jews don't believe in him as a Mashiach, and then the Jews will be protected. Unfortunately, we find out that for whatever reason, the Jewish community wasn't able to arrest him. And ultimately, the Muslim leader did arrest him. And we find out from a letter 20 years later. Maimonides sent a letter to a different community. He shares the story. He says that he said, I'm Mashiach. God told me. So the Muslim ruler said, give me a sign. So he said, chop off my head. And if I stay alive, then you'll know I'm the real Mashiach. And the Muslim ruler said, if that's the case, I'll follow you. They chopped off his head, and surprise, surprise, he died. So that was the end of this unstable man. Maimonides said he might have been God-fearing. Doesn't mean he wasn't it could be he's crazy too. You could be God-fearing and crazy. It's possible. Okay. Now let's go fast forward to another case. Let's fast forward to the 1500s, to 1615. Okay, this is a tragic case, another sad case. Let's who can read for us? Stan, read for us on page 205.
Seeking guidance after bloodshed. The distinguished Rabbi Shmuel, I received your verdict you issued regarding the hideous and aberrant act, the murder committed by one of the ruffians among our people, as noted in the affidavits that you sent to me. The murderer is in the custody of the Polish police, and his fate had yet to be decided. You requested my opinion on this and whether you are judging correctly in absolving him of the death penalty. Although I am not settled and do not have my sacred books with me as they are still in Lublin, I will respond briefly.
So what is the case? The sad case is that there was a Jewish man who murdered another Jewish person on Shabbos. This was a very rare thing. It barely occurred. And now the Polish authorities arrested the man. Now, usually, who was responsible for settling internal matters in the Jewish community? At that time in Poland, Israeli, the Jewish community was in charge of resolving their internal matters. So this was a Jew against a Jew. So the question was asked, should the Jewish community use their power to request the Polish to give us the Jew back?
You got mail.
The Jew was holding the Polish authorities are holding him. What are they going to do with him? They're going to kill him. They're going to sentence him to death. The family of the victim wanted him killed. However, the Jewish community was unsure. Should they leave? On the one hand, They weren't sure what to do. They said, first of all, should we invoke our authority to deal with this on our own internal ways? And if we do deal with it, what should be the law? Can a Jewish court today kill someone? So the rabbi who wrote, we know his name was Rabbi Shmuel. He wrote to Rabbi Meir of Lublin. I think, and he wrote that I think we should make it an internal matter because we don't want a separation of church and state. This is a Jewish matter. We should invoke our authority as a Jewish matter to use our authority. And then what are we going to do with our authority? We're just going to keep him locked up. We can't kill him because we're not in temple times. We're not a Sanhedrin. We don't have the authority to try capital cases. And so we just have to imprison him for life. We can't actually kill him. That was Reb Shmuel's proposal. Reb Meir of Lublin disagreed. And so let's read text 5a, text 5b. Stan, if you could do for read. Before we do, let's do the exercise first. What if you were Rabbi Meir of Lublin? How would you answer? What do you think should happen to this person? Should we kill him, or should we leave him in the Polish authorities, or should we deal with the matter in-house? It's tough, huh? Okay, so no one wants to chime in, so we'll just continue. So
In-house.
in-house. Okay, and what should we do? We should imprison him for life, or we should execute him?
Well, we don't believe in execution. So
What do you mean? In the Torah, it says someone who does this and this should be
an eye
stoned.
for an eye. Is that still
Not
is
an
that
eye for an
still-
eye. An eye for an eye. An eye for an eye. We interpret to mean you have to pay the medical bills and the restitution for the eye. But that was always our tradition. But the Torah clearly says certain violations there's a capital punishment. So
until today? Really? Until today?
Well, I'm asking you. What do you think it applies today? Do you think?
Well, I know that I know that the community goes to jails, and because we believe in, doing teshuvah, we believe in, changing.
Right. Okay, so let's look at some of the arguments against and for. The argument against by Shmuel, it says the death penalty can only be carried out by Sanhedrin in Jerusalem. If you're a Jewish court that is not in Jerusalem, in biblical times and temple times, you have no authority to execute anyone, even if you have permission from the non-Jewish rulers. That was his first argument against. So we have to protect this Jew from getting executed because we can't execute him. Number two, murder was not a widespread societal issue. Sometimes there's an Emergency Powers Act where if it's a widespread issue, then you're allowed to execute because it's an emergency basis. Okay? And this is not an emergency basis because there's one murderer, one murder that Jews are murdering Jews. And his third argument was if we cannot execute him, then it's our obligation to spare him from others too. If we, the Jewish community, are not allowed to execute him, we're going to allow the Polish to execute him. We just have to imprison him in our own jails for life. That was Reb Shmuel's proposal. What's Reb Meir's argument? Reb Meir says, first of all, it's not true what you wrote, that only a court in Jerusalem could do capital cases. It's not true. Any Jewish court can execute person. The standards are very high. You need two witnesses that are not related to each other and are not related to the perpetrator and are not related to the victim. And they have to be interrogated and they have to see the act. They can't just see a person walk into a cave with a clean knife and walk out with a bloody knife and in the cave is a dead person. You didn't see the act. You're making assumptions. Oh, he walked in clean knife. He walked a bloody knife. He must be the killer. No, that's not the high enough standard. There's a very high standard in Jewish law. But if you meet that standard, Mayor of Lublin said any Jewish court, if they had permission from the non-Jewish rulers of the country, then they're allowed to execute. Number two, he says the reality is this murderer, it wasn't the first murder it was the second murder in this region. So it's becoming a little bit of a trend. And you have to set an example. You have to say, if we don't stop it now, it's likely to, people will not take it seriously. Okay, and his third argument was, certainly, we're not the ones who are executing him. It's the Polish government that wants to execute him. We should not get involved. Okay, so that was his conclusion. But now, that's not why we brought this whole case to our story. The reason we brought this case is text 5b. Text 5b is important for us. So
I just want to ask you one question. Is this similar to like Jesus? Because, some people think we did kill him, but we didn't. So is it the same idea? Because we knew he was a false Messiah, but we didn't do anything about it, did we?
no, we didn't have the power. I mean, Jews didn't have any power in Rome, under the Roman authorities in Israel to do anything.
Oh, so that's, uh-huh.
Yeah. So were Jews happy that he was killed? Probably. But Jews did not kill him. Okay, so who wants to volunteer text 5b? Is there anyone that didn't read yet? Okay, so we're back to Sophie. Sophie, read first text 5b.
Seeing beyond the case, Rabbi Meir of Lublin. Since the matter has become known among the non-Jews and the criminal is sitting in prison among them, if you allow him to live, it will disgrace the Jewish community and its values. Moreover, the non-Jews may be emboldened in the future to show leniency in the punishment of Gentiles who shed Jewish blood, God forbid. This concern is obvious. God has thankfully arranged that he's already in the hands of the local authorities. So the best course of action is for the Jewish court to have no involvement in this matter. Rather, the victims' families should demand capital punishment as retribution from the Polish authorities. Through this, the societal breach will be repaired, the name of heaven will be sanctified, and all of Israel will be blameless. I have written what appears to me to be the law. In my limited understanding, peace to you and all the judges of Israel.
Okay, what is he saying here? He's saying, even if you don't really agree with my opinions on halachic, just consider the practical ramifications if we're going to go with your way of thinking. What's happening? He's already amongst the Poles. So they hear this story. They know of the story. The story is not internal anymore. The story has leaked out about one Jew killing another Jew. If we're going to intervene, bring him into our prison system, and we're not going to do nothing about it, so they're going to say, oh, so now if a Pole kills a Jew, should we kill a Pole for killing a Jew? No. The Jews don't demand justice, so why should we demand justice? So he's saying, think of the precedent you're setting. So that was how we see. He's just understanding human nature. If the Poles will see that the Jews let their Jewish criminals scot-free, then the Poles won't act when it's a Pole that attacks a Jew either. So that's a very important element. Especially they see a Jewish court is intervening to let the criminal go free. What message does that send? It makes it look like Jews don't care about the victims. So for these reasons, he said, even if you're not understanding my halachic points of view, you disagree, but on a practical consideration, that we should do nothing and we should let the Poles, we should let the family of the victims go ahead and request that the Poles execute the murderer. And that's what happened. Let's take a look. We'll watch a video of a very similar case.
In 17th century Moravia, a Jewish traveller was murdered on the road. The identity of the non-Jewish assailant was no mystery, but in those days, justice did not stir unless it was demanded. A relative of the victim had to initiate a private suit, which entailed paying prosecutors, judges, and various civic officials. In this instance, the victim's relatives hesitated. Perhaps the task was too daunting. Perhaps the financial burden was too great. Whatever the reason, they failed to act, and the murderer remained free. The leaders of the Jewish community grew anxious. They turned to Rabbi Menachem Mendel Krochmal of Nikolsburg in the southeast region of the modern-day Czech Republic. Could the communal leadership, they asked, exercise its authority to compel the victim's relatives to sue the killer in the Moravian courts? And if the relatives possessed sufficient means, could they be obligated to bear the legal costs involved? Rabbi Krochmal drew on the Talmud to respond affirmatively, but he also drew a line. Given the endemic corruption, bribes or purchased letters of recommendation were often required to advance a case through the bureaucratic mire. These costs, the rabbi clarified, could not be imposed upon the family. Otherwise, relatives of victims fearing financial ruin would escape to other towns, and murderers would go unpunished. Rabbi Krochmal invoked a Talmudic precedent. The sages recount how, in ancient Israel, funeral rites had become so extravagant that some families, unable to meet the costs, abandoned their dead. Rabban Gamliel reversed this trend by requesting to be buried in simple linen. Once this became the norm, no one abandoned their dead anymore. So too here, Rabbi Krochmal reasoned, render the pursuit of justice prohibitively expensive, and justice itself will disappear. In cases when bribes were needed to bring the killer to justice, Rabbi Krochmal stated that the Jewish community must assume responsibility for the expenses. Why? Because failure to do so would place all members of the community in peril. If no charges were brought, if Jewish blood could be shed without consequence, every merchant, every student, and every family who ventures onto the road will do so in danger. He reminded the community that it had long been the accepted practice for Jewish leadership to seek justice, even when the prospects of conviction were dim. These cases were brought before the Moravian courts to declare publicly and unequivocally that Jewish blood is not ownerless. Rabbi Krochmal was not merely a jurist who interpreted sacred texts. He was a leader who understood how incentives shape action and how perception determines public safety. In a world where justice was fragile, Rabbi Krochmal found a way to protect his community through deep human understanding.
So in his brilliant wisdom, Rabbi Krochmal was telling the community, you want to make the family members responsible to pay? When you make it their obligation, and it's a heavy obligation, you're going to basically discourage families from sticking around. They're all going to run away. And that will discourage that justice won't happen. And that will cause that murderers will be rampant, Jewish blood will be cheap, and then it affects the whole community. So the community has to take responsibility. The Jewish families have to pay just the legal costs, but the bribes and the recommendation letters and all of that has to come from the community. The community has to bear that expense because it's a communal responsibility. And think of the big picture. And so we see the rabbi is saying not just yes, no, I'm going to look in the books, yes or no, are they obligated or not obligated? Think of the ramifications if we impose that obligation on the family. Will they follow? Will they listen, or will they run away? No, they'll run away. And meanwhile, murderers are going to go on the street. We have to make this a communal obligation. That way, families will seek justice and murderers will be off the street. So that's what's done. Now we'll move on to, I think, the most beautiful part of the class, or the most interesting, where you see the rabbi's beautiful insight to a lighter case. We're going to move away. We just did some heavy cases. The Yemen case is a heavy case. Jews dealing with false messiah. We had the case just before this, Mayor of Lublin, where one Jew murdered another. And then we had this third case where non-Jews are murdering victims, but the family is not seeking justice because they can't afford all the bribes and everything. But now we move on to a lighter case. And this brings us back to something we mentioned in lesson 2. Do you remember in lesson 2, we spoke about a chicken in Izmir, that there's a breed of chicken and the rabbi was running around to figure out, is this the right breed of chicken? So let's recap. The Torah lists 24 non-kosher birds, but it's in Hebrew. And we don't know, we know some of the birds that are non-kosher from the list, but some of the birds, we know their Hebrew names, but we're not sure which species of non-kosher bird it's referring to. So what do? Instead of having a black list, we inverted it to a white list. The Torah gave us a black list. These 24 species you can't eat. All other birds are kosher. But we kind of switched it to a white list. Is there a Jewish community that has been eating this breed of chicken? If we have a tradition about it that it's kosher, then it's kosher. If we have no tradition about it, then we need very good evidence that it's kosher before we include it on the white list. So that has been the norm. So we saw how the Tzanzer rabbi in Galicia, when this new breed is coming to his shores, he sends a messenger all the way to the Middle East, which is not an easy thing to do because he lived under the Russian Empire, and the Russians were at war with the Ottoman Empire. And so sending a scout to the Ottoman countries, it wasn't a simple thing at all. But he eventually came back saying, this chicken is kosher. This breed of, not chicken, whatever it was, whatever kind of bird this was, is kosher bird, and it can be eaten in Europe as well. Okay? Now, what happened? What happened was about 10, 15 years after this whole issue was resolved, for whatever reason, the whole issue stirred up again. The issue stirred up again. Everyone's like, oh, this bird is not really kosher after all. Why? Because in the Talmud, it tells us that a bird that catches its prey mid-flight is a sign of a non-kosher bird. Okay? So if you know a bird that it catches its prey mid-flight, that's one of the signs that it's on the blacklist. And someone witnessed that this breed of chicken that the rabbis were saying is kosher because there's a tradition in the Middle East that is kosher, they saw that this bird in mid-flight captured prey and was eating the prey mid-flight. So this whole thing erupted again. So let's take a look at text 6. Okay? Text 6 is Rabbi Shmuel Schneerson. He was the 5th Chabad Rebbe of Lubavitch. And he said, this bird is kosher. We already established it's kosher. The fact that we saw a bird flying in the air, if I go on your farm and I see a chicken flying in the air and catching prey, does that mean chicken isn't kosher? No, chicken is kosher. A chicken will never not be kosher. Even if a chicken changes its nature or you see a crazy chicken, doesn't make the whole breed of chicken not kosher. Once we know chicken is kosher, chicken is kosher. Once we know turkey is kosher, turkey is kosher. Once we know geese, whatever it is, whatever we know is kosher, once it's kosher, it's kosher. There's no way that it could become an unkosher breed. So that's why Shmuel of Lubavitch said, we already know from 10, 15 years ago that this species, we did our investigations. We know it's kosher. The fact that someone witnessed differently, a trait of non-kosherness doesn't change the facts. But let's read text 6, which I think is the brilliance here. Gilda, are you speaking to us or to someone else? But maybe you could read for us text 6 also.
I'm sorry. I have to go to that other.
Okay, perfect.
Okay,
It's a
everybody.
pleasure. It's good to see
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
Okay. Police, read for us text 6. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Follow the money. For all the reasons, it seems to me that those chickens are permitted to be eaten. The humble shall eat and be satisfied. In our town of LUBAVITCH, they are eaten without the slightest hesitation. I have also heard that this is a matter that has already been thoroughly investigated and that they were ruled kosher. Similarly, in places such as Vitebsk and the surrounding areas, the accepted practice is to treat them as kosher. The stringenics have originated with the slaughters and the tax lessons of your community. As children bring them less revenue.
Okay, so this last paragraph is what I'm most interested in. Okay, this is fascinating. He says, why is this whole controversy popping up again? Where's it coming from? It's not coming from the rabbis. It's not the rabbis who are putting out letters in all the synagogues. Hey, be careful with this new breed of chickens. So where's the energy coming from? You know where it's coming from? It's coming from the shochet, the kosher slaughterers, and the tax lessees of your community. What happens? Jewish communities in those days hired a shochet. The shochet, you had a salary. A shochet was on salary of the community to slaughter all the chickens. Now he had to slaughter all the chickens for free. He didn't get paid extra for slaughtering a chicken. What did he get paid extra for? For a goat, for a cow. He got paid extra for that. So now, until now, before this breed of chicken was available, it was hard. Chicken was expensive, chicken whatever. So people were bringing meat. But now this new breed of chicken becomes available. And the shochet's like, I got to do this for free. What about all the meat I could be doing? So he has an incentive when someone comes to him. He says, I heard there's issues with this kind of chicken. Go speak to your rabbi to find out if it's really kosher. It's not the shochet's job to decide if it's kosher. It's the rabbi's job. But meanwhile, everyone who's coming to the shochet, he may not even realize this, but his incentive, his pocketbook is hurting. His wallet is hurting now that this chicken is available. So the rabbi's saying, the fact that this question keeps on coming up, it's not for pious reasons. It's because someone stands to make a profit. Who? If we invalidate this chicken, then people will have to get more expensive meat products and the shochet will make more money. Who else stands to benefit? The tax lessees of the community. The way it worked is, for a long time, Jewish communities had a box. And anyone who slaughtered any slaughter, they had to put a coin in the communal box. Now, for a chicken, it was a very small amount. For a cow or a goat, or a sheep, it was a much larger amount. Eventually, the Tsar is like, hey, I should be in charge of this taxes. He took over the box, and then he hired Jews to be the collectors on it, to enforce the tax, and the Jew would get commission. So now it's not only the shochet that has an incentive to make sure the Jewish community stop shechting chickens and shechting these higher expensive animals. It's also the tax broker. So we see. So the Reb Shmuel Schneerson of Lubavitch, he's saying the fact that this question keeps on coming up has nothing to do with piety or Torah. It's not a Torah matter. It's just people, are blinded by their money. They're trying to make extra money, so they're trying to be pious and say maybe this breed isn't kosher. So that's how you see a rabbi has to be smart in understanding motivations. And finally, we go to one last case, our final case, which is text 7. Genya, Stan, read for us text 7.
Rules of recognition. You ask, Reuven owned a home near the synagogue, which he had built beautifully, and he wanted to connect it to the synagogue to enlarge the sanctuary. However, the community didn't allow this because it would have degraded the value of the existing seats. Indeed, they agreed that the extension would house the Torah Ark, and that's what they did, with Reuven sponsoring the entire project. The donor Reuven has now come to inscribe his name over the ark so he will be remembered for his donation. A few members of the congregation objected. Tell me, do they have the rights to stop him or not?
What do you think? Should we stop this rich man from putting his name on the ark?
No.
No, we should let his name go on the ark.
Why doesn't he deserve the recognition? He did the mitzvah.
Okay, everyone agrees? Is there anyone that disagrees?
I used to think that it's like kind of showing off, but I remember your father even said to me, it might inspire others to donate.
Right. And that's based on this response. But you should know, many Jews, they get very uncomfortable with the name recognition because we know the great value in doing mitzvahs for the right motive. You should do it for the sake of heaven, not for honor, not for fame. And the Torah says to be humble. And they feel this is the opposite method. This is like you're doing a mitzvah for your own agenda, just to get fame. And so many Jews are very uncomfortable with names but you look at like Jewish organizations like Hatzalah, the Jewish ambulance volunteer. Their ambulance is covered in Hebrew letters. What are those Hebrew letters? Prayers? No. Donated by this person in memory of that person. It's all dedications. That's how they raise money for everything, is things are dedicated. So let's take a look at what he responds. But before we look at what does he respond? Ultimately, he says, you cannot stop this dedication. Why? There's no source prohibits it. There's nowhere in Jewish law that says we cannot do a dedication. There's nowhere that it says it's not allowed. Number two, dedications are common in Spanish synagogues. And number three, the Talmud tells us of an inscription in the Holy Temple. In the Holy Temple, there was a dedication plaque for someone who donated something very significant. So this is old Jewish custom. This is not new. But now let's look at text 8. He quotes a medrash, text 8. Genya.
Okay. If only they knew, Midrash Ruth Rabbah. Had Reuven known that God would write about him in Genesis 37:21, Reuven heard and saved Joseph from their hand. He would have carried Joseph on his shoulder to his father. Had Aaron known that God would write about him in Exodus 4:14, behold, Aaron is coming out to greet you. He would have gone to greet Moses with tambourines and dancing. Had Boaz known that God would write about him in Ruth 2:14, he handed Ruth roasted grain, and she ate and was satisfied and had some left over. He would have fed her fat calves.
What's the medrash saying? The Torah tells us about the three special qualities of these three people. They did mitzvahs. Reuven wanted to save Joseph's life. Aaron wasn't jealous of Moses and came out to honor him and welcome him. He didn't feel, oh, my little brother is taking over the show. He felt ready. And Boaz gave charity to Ruth. But yet, the Medrash says, had they known that this would be recorded for posterity and be written in the books, human nature is they would have gone above and beyond. Imagine I know that the Supreme Court of the United States in 10 years from now is going to quote this lesson video, this class that we're doing together, as a precedent for some case. Do you know how much I will prepare for this lesson to make sure that every word I said is organized and proper and there's no mistakes? When you know something's important, recorded, it makes you take it much more seriously. So the same thing the Rashba is saying. When people know that their donation is going to be recorded on a plaque, that makes sure they give more. The friends see they want to give more. Now let's translate that to today. Most people on TikTok, what do they share? Or on Instagram, they're posting their vacations, they're posting their fancy things they bought. But their mitzvahs, oh, I want to be humble. I'm not going to show off my mitzvahs. So what do people that go on Instagram think? That the whole world, no one's interested in doing mitzvahs. Everyone's interested in vacations and fancy cars. But if you post every time you do a mitzvah, is that showing off or is that inspiring other people to do a mitzvah? It's going to inspire other people. Oh, Felice is doing a mitzvah. I could also do a mitzvah. Genya is doing a mitzvah. I am also going to do a mitzvah. I know, Genya, you do it already all the time.
And so does Felice.
And Felice. Well, I'm not on Instagram, so
Well, that's what Instagram is. Everyone's sharing their goodness.
Their goodness. But we have to share mitzvahs as much as possible.
Yeah.
It motivates other people to do the same. And with that, we see just the importance of understanding human nature. If you're going to stop dedications, you think people are going to give tzedakah secretly? No, there'll be less tzedakah in the community. That's what will happen. If we publicize when people do mitzvahs, what will happen? More people will do mitzvahs. Right? And that's what we have to learn from.
What if the person doing the mitzvah requests that there is no public announcement of it?
Yeah, then we have to honor his requests. Obviously, if someone requests that it be anonymous, and very often people request they want it to be anonymous for different reasons. First of all, sometimes they're not able to give more. Or they don't, and they don't want you gave to that organization, you have to give to my organization too. Or sometimes they don't want to be judged for the causes that they gave to. Like, why do you give to this cause? Why do you give to a different cause? So people have a right to demand to be anonymous. But if they can, they should publicize their mitzvahs. So the same thing is, the main thing we have to know is when we approach education and influence, we should do it with sensitivity towards others. We have the best chance of effective guidance. We have to know who we're speaking to. So it's not what you know, and people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's the important thing. It's not a show off. You're speaking to your children, you're going to show off how much you know and how smart you are. That's not the point. You have to make sure the person feels cared for and that you have their best interest in mind. That's the most important ingredient. After that, they can hear even very difficult things. But if they feel you don't care, even if you're dropping truth bombs, very powerful ideas and good things, it just won't be heard because you didn't do it with the fifth chelik, with the extra sensitivity necessary.
Rabbi, if two people do the exact same mitzvah, one person does it anonymously, the other person does it and there's recognition, is that mitzvah considered equivalent or is one considered greater than the other?
It really depends on what their motive is. If the person who's doing it anonymous is because he doesn't want to give more tzedakah, and he's capable of giving more tzedakah, then you say, okay, then it wasn't a good thing that you stayed anonymous. If his intention in staying anonymous was because he wasn't trying to seek fame, he just wanted to do it for the sake of heaven, then it was a good idea he was anonymous. The same thing the person publicizing. If his intention was for fame and honor, then it wasn't a good thing. But if his intention was to encourage other people to do more mitzvahs, then it was a good thing. So you really, in some ways, you could have this person is greater than that, and that person is greater than this. And ultimately, some people have mixed motives, right? I want to do it to publicize. And really, ultimately, these things are up to Hashem. And either way, we shouldn't let the evil inclination trick us and say, oh, I'm afraid I might be doing it for the wrong motive, so let me not give tzedakah at all. If what it's going to take to give you tzedakah is that you'll get a nice dinner, be awarded at the dinner, so let that be. At least the Jewish community will get the tzedakah and there will be tzedakah in the world. So we don't want to let the motives alone prevent you from doing a mitzvah. Do the mitzvah even if it's not for the purest of motives, but try to upgrade it to the most refined motives possible. Yeah.
Lesson 5. The fifth factor. 1. Rabbinic excellence demands more than mastery of legal texts. It requires a sensitivity to human beings, their needs, vulnerabilities, and inner worlds. 2. The Responsa literature reveals that the rabbinic role entails discerning the unspoken emotional reality beneath the question. When this is considered, pre-existing halachic principles might become relevant, reshaping the ultimate ruling. 3. Many responsa reflect an attunement to the precarious realities of a Jewish minority in a hostile exile, offering not only rulings, but strategic guidance to safeguard the community from external threats. 4. The responsa often demonstrate the capacity to expose hidden motivations of self-interest, ensuring that halacha is protected from distortion. 5. The responsa literature often reflects a commitment to cultivating communal well-being, such as through the strategic use of public recognition to encourage generosity and civic responsibility. 6. The type of wisdom we studied today is a vital competency for anyone engaged in the sacred work of education, mentorship, or leadership. Transmitting values is not a mechanical transfer of knowledge, but a delicate relationship-based endeavor that requires emotional intelligence, situational awareness, and strategic communication.
Okay, join us next week for exploring futuristic responsa. And next week, we're going to do it together. We're going to take all the lessons we learned in the last few lessons, and we're going to, put on a rabbi's hat and try to see if we can deduce futuristic cases that haven't been decided in rabbinic responsa yet. We're going to try to arrive at some conclusions of our own about new future technologies. I look forward to joining you next week for our grand finale.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I
Have a
also want to
great
take
evening,
this.
everyone.
I'll invite you next week. And if February 22nd, Sunday, February 22nd, is our daughter Eti Siyum Sefer Torah. We hope everyone will come. It's at 2:30. 2:30 is the Torah, writing the Torah letters. 3:30 is the street procession and parade and dancing and akafot. And Tuesday, February 24th at 6 p.m. for the ladies is the Hamantash Bake and the Rosh Chodesh Society. That's a Tuesday at 6 p.m. Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.